Ever wondered how children really learn in their early years? What sparks their curiosity and what engages them? Foundational years are not just about learning letters and numbers. They are the building blocks for all future learning. For over a decade, Language and Learning Foundation has worked to strengthen foundational learning through effective classroom practices and system strengthening initiatives. Drawing on this experience, we bring to you LLF Speaks Season 2, a 10-episode podcast series where we engage with global and national voices to explore crucial subjects, contributing to improving FLN outcomes. Stay tuned to deep dive on how to do FLN, conversations on building foundational learning at scale.
Hello everyone, I'm Shveta Lall, Associate Director at Language and Learning Foundation. Welcome to another episode of LLF Speaks. In this series, we are trying to explore one central question: how foundational literacy and numeracy efforts translate into actual classroom changes and meaningful learning outcomes for the students at scale in India. At the center of any educational reform is the teacher, and rightly so, because no matter how strong the policy, textbooks, and curriculums are, it is the teacher who shape what children actually experience in the classroom every day. Yet teacher professional development is often reduced to a single idea: train teachers so that they can bring about a change in the learning outcomes of the students. But meaningful professional development is far more than that. It is about supporting teachers as learners themselves, giving them the space to reflect, adapt, and continuously strengthen their practices so that it translates into classrooms. So, in today's episode, we'll explore how professional development of teachers a little deeper. To explore this, I'm delighted to have with me Mr. Subir Shukla. Mr. Shukla is a former education quality advisor to the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India, where he contributed to the development of the quality framework for the implementation of Right to Education and Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. He is currently the principal coordinator of IGNUS Group, leading initiatives focused on large-scale systemic change in education across Asia. His work spans curriculum and textbook development, teacher education, and strengthening educational programs for vulnerable communities through partnership with government and NGOs. Through his extensive experience and deep commitment to equity in education, he continues to shape important conversations around quality learning for all children. Welcome, Subir. It is wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really happy and grateful to LLF for this opportunity. It's an important topic to be talking about.
So to begin with the conversation, let me start with the fundamental question. Like, it's been almost 5 years since NEP 2020 came into existence, and we have been talking so much about foundational literacy and numeracy. I want to understand, why is teacher professional development so crucial for changing classroom practices in the FLN grades? If you can talk about that, yeah.
So I'll have to talk of a bit of history here. In the 1990s, when I began working, we had only 40% children in school, of whom 60% would be dropping out. So as a result, what happened was that though reading and writing were always a well-known area of work, it was never a very big issue because children only from certain sections of society came into class, and it was not a big deal to teach them. And in fact, you will never find that learning to read was a very big issue because we were dealing with only a small sliver of our population. But then we became a victim of our success. In the 90s, we worked very hard to get all children into school. So consequently now, from 40% we went to 100% in a very short duration. So children who traditionally never ever used to be in school, working children, children from migrating population, children with disabilities, girls from certain communities, remote areas, tribal groups, all of them were now in school. The student group changed dramatically, but our pedagogy remained of the same old kind. So even though the student composition was different, the method didn't change, and one consequence of that was that very quickly, within 10 years, we began to see that learning levels were declining. And the World Bank began to speak of learning poverty, global learning crisis, many of these kind of things. This is not restricted only to India. This has happened anywhere where education for all efforts have taken place. This has happened. So one dimension is the student is not what the student was. The student is bringing a different cultural capital into the classroom. Her own languages are different than the ones that we are trying to teach. But in the meantime, another thing has happened, which is that what literacy is and numeracy is itself has changed. With technology coming in, we are using languages in different ways than before. With diversity growing in our society, we are communicating with a wider range of people than we did before. We have to do more things with language than we were doing earlier. Also, earlier, if you know, remember, maybe you are young enough to remember that when we were young, just having a lot of knowledge was seen as being knowledgeable, having a lot of information, right? But now it is not. Now something else. You have to process language differently, process information differently. You have to choose what to believe, not to believe. So what we call critical thinking is part of literacy in a way it wasn't before. So for all of these reasons, that learning levels are low because of change in student populations, what is to be learned is very different. And every teacher who is a teacher also learned literacy 20, 30 years ago when it was different. Teachers now need to learn to teach very differently than they did before. It's not something they experienced, so they have to do something which they didn't go through. And if they are not prepared for it, they will not be able to do it. So that's the reason why so much of emphasis on TPD for FLN.
Absolutely right. Even we feel that there's a general belief that anyone can teach in early grades, whereas we all know that teaching in early grades, it's a skillful job. It requires specialization. And because this is the area where the children are actually building the foundation of all learning. And like the recent TLPS study that was done, again points out that though the teachers have like almost 83% teachers have undergone teacher training, but if you go into their classrooms, the way they are taking classes in the FLN grades is quite different. Like you can see if the children are engaged, they are engaged in not very meaningful activities like rote learning, choral repetition, just copying from the blackboard. So these are the kind of activities. And you rightly said that these teachers need to have more than knowledge, the pedagogical understanding of how children learn in early grades, and how to build that confidence in the children in early grades is also equally important. So I think that is really very, very important that the children, the teachers are prepared for teaching the foundational grades. But coming to my next question, how is teacher professional development is happening in today's time in India, and what are the key gaps that you see in this professional development? Yeah.
It's problematic, let's say. So the idea is that when teachers are called for in-service training in particular, I am focusing on in-service more because 1 crore teachers are in place and only 1.5 lakh come in every year from pre-service. So typically this process is bound by the kind of format that has come into place in large-scale programs, which includes in-service workshops. It includes some online teacher training. These workshops are often a few days, not very long. And compared to earlier, when trainers were prepared for very long, then nowadays trainers are not prepared for very long. One of my favorite ways of describing what is happening in training is that in every state, training modules are produced. And since I've been in the field from 95, if I were to place all the modules produced in any state, one on top of each other, I will get a pile 10 foot high. Okay, which means we have tens of thousands of pages of modules. How much is actually being done, right? So there are huge gaps. Our focus, because of the way our programming works, is a lot on the inputs. It's not much on the outcomes. And outcomes are not in terms of what children learn. It's in terms of what teachers do. What you were pointing out in the TLPS survey, that teachers are doing what they've learned in a mechanistic way. They're kind of appearing to do it, just make children sit in group or show a few pictures. And there are two dimensions. One is the pedagogy part, and the other is connecting with children. Very often, when children don't respond, it is not because they don't understand; it's because they find you boring. you know, and so how do you connect with children of that age group? In any case, right? There's a whole social, psychosocial, cultural, emotional dimension to it. But then, how do you enable them to learn language in the context? That's a little different. So the gaps are that one, the conceptualization is poor and weak. It's not conceptualized in terms of outcomes, and the processes do not manifest what teachers have to do. If a teacher comes to a training where they find it so exciting that they forget their lunch, then they will actually do it. But if they're only looking at their phone and waiting for it to end, chances are they're not going to do it. And unfortunately, that is what happens a lot. So, lack of conceptualization, poor processes, lack of training of trainers, unclear rollout in terms of what happens in the classroom, not enough monitoring and support to deliver and make the actual change happen. So there are several big gaps because of which the investment may be a lot, but the result is much lower compared to that.
I think just to add to it, the new education policy 2020 and even the Nipun Bharat explicitly calls for experiential, reflective, and practice based learning for teachers, like learning by doing, by exploration, and also through meaning making. But what we really see in the ground, as you rightly pointed out, is that the teachers are told about active learning without being actually involved in that. We are asking teachers to do something for the children for which they are never exposed or experiencing that in the trainings itself. And I think that is the major gap in the trainings today that we can feel. So like we talked about, like one of the major ways in which trainings are happening in India is through the cascade training. So if I have to talk about how we can actually change the way that cascade trainings are happening, are there any inputs from the experience that you have across India, working in so many states? What are the ways by which we can actually improve the cascade trainings? Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to share with you is I'll put a caption to it, which is whatever I'm saying is so easy to do that it is very difficult to do. So one of the core problem in many ways in TPD and also to an extent in FLN is that we are working on basis of a command and control system. There's a hierarchy, everybody is supposed to follow instruction. But in reality, it is not children who are accountable to teachers, but teachers who are accountable to children. And so are officials accountable to teachers, and trainers are accountable to teachers. So if you see it from that perspective, then just as we expect in the classroom that learning will be co-created between teachers and children together, to overcome cascade, we also need to look at co-creation as an approach. And I'll explain that. This is a model that we actually implemented in India when it was unified UP. So this was a training that happened in 300 places at the same time. So to do this, the plan was that it was a 6-day training with 4 sessions every day, and which means 24 sessions. But the trainers, they were trained for 9 days, and they were trained in being able to conduct 40 sessions. Each trainer team had to decide which session they would take out of the 40 for those 24. And to do that, they had to look at data of their block. What were the strengths, weaknesses. By that time, learning related data was there. So then, instead of a one-size-fits-all training running across the state by, like instructions from above, the team that was conducting the training was actually part of the decision-making process. Similarly, and this worked extremely well. We found that earlier, when it was a normal cascade, the trainer was only wanting to know whether they were doing what they were expected to do. But now they were extremely concerned whether they were taking the right decision or not. So that ownership began to come. So the same thing should happen down the line. So one big change I would expect is a slightly decentralized approach, wherein we agree on formats, on our goals and a broad format, but provide resources and let each one down the line take their own decision. Everybody has to be accountable for the results they produced, but the method that they use has to be their own in keeping with their circumstances. Just to mention that this approach that I described for UP was actually done for a few years in different states. That is also the only time in India when learning levels went up. And China sent a team to study this method in UP because China found that is the only large-scale method like this. Professor A.K. Sharma, who was the director of NCRT, he actually had a study done on this to show how effective it was. So in my view, this kind of approach where we reconstruct the input at every level, we align on outcomes, but we differ on inputs and methods and localized ways of doing things. I think this is the way to go forward in a place where there's a lot of diversity of context. So yes, this is the way I would really do it.
So, Subir, I would like to share our experience also. Like, we are also working in multiple states, and where we have observed the trainings happening right from the state, going to the district, and then to the blocks, and then to the teacher. So, there are different cascades. What we have actually understood from all the observation, and we have tried to actually put them in what are some of the best practices. So, in a way, we can put it into two areas. Like, one is the content design. So, if you have to improve the cascade training, I would say like there are two parts of it. One is the content design and one is the delivery. When we say the content design, as you rightly said, the trainings nowadays flooded with so much of information, whereas we feel that we should limit that, like only few messaging to the teachers that they can actually take into the classrooms. The second is like the way the trainings are happening, like most of the time it is not experiential. How you make trainings more experiential. So there is a 60-20-20 principle that have been talked about across the world, where 20% of the time is given for the content, 20% time where the facilitator is demonstrating themselves, and the 60% of the time where the teachers actually practice, try, reflecting, and getting feedback from the teacher, from the facilitators, so that when they go back, they are carrying one simple or some messages that they can immediately go and apply in the classroom. When it comes to the delivery part, most of the time we have seen the trainers or the facilitators are not someone who have come from the background, from the that's one of the big issues. And also there is very less time for planning. As you said, like it has to be planned well. They should actually customize the trainings for their needs on the ground. So I feel these are some of the simple steps if the government put effort and start working, which I'm sure many of the government have actually started doing that. It can bring about a change in the way the cascades are happening right now.
Yeah.
Another thing I think to be like when we talk about the NEP, it calls for 50 hours of meaningful multi-format CPD every year. While Nipun specifically says regular academic support, peer sharing, and dedicated time for teachers to observe and reflect. If we have to go beyond fixing the cascade trainings, what does a complete multi-layered PD system actually looks like to you?
Yeah, this needs a whole week to answer. So, yeah, but there are some. I'll start with a few things about how we conceptualize change. One, if I were to take desired FLN practices and list them out, I will find that some are easier to implement than others. And if I sequence them in stages, for example, if it's much easier to do oral activities than to do reading, writing based activities, than to do TLM based activities, I would sequence the rollout of my inputs according to level of complexity for the teacher, rather than what is more important. So then, and I'll do it in smaller parts, recurrent model as it is often called. So I'll ask teachers to do oral activities in the class and succeed. In our experience, the only thing that changes teachers is this feeling that children value them. When children say, sir, we enjoyed your class, or we miss you when you're not there, that is when a teacher gets hooked to the idea. So how can I make a teacher the hero to his children in the class? That's my objective. One simple way is, of course, experiential planning, all of that, but roll it out in sequence of complexity. So that's one simple thing to do. But more importantly, how will a teacher know that what they're doing is the right thing? So usually teachers have like four big questions in my experience. One is they want to know exactly what is to be done, so which you already covered in what you said, and also why. But they want to know, how do I do it in my place? It's important to do an experiential process, but whatever I do in training is different from what happens in the class. So their question is, how do I do it in my place? And here, I would say that it's extremely critical to adapt to the ground realities that teachers face. They have 3 classes to handle sometimes. They have multiple languages. Children are they don't come every day. Some children come in the morning, some in the afternoon. It's material is not always available. So if I make a model of pedagogy which can be adapted to the classroom, then chances are it will be taken up a whole lot more. But having said all of this, this is about other conceptualization. One very big problem we have is that we tend to, at least in a lot of places, the focus is only on the school. So I would say that FLN training has to be taken in a systemic manner. A project we implemented just before the pandemic, it contains some of these elements. I want to just describe it briefly. We agreed with the state government, we did in 5 districts, 8,500 schools. We agreed with the state government that in let's say just language, what is the big change you want to see in class 3 and class 4? So we agreed that children will be able to answer questions that begin with why, how, and if on text that they're able to read on their own. So age appropriate text and answer this. So this is called a nested outcome because all the other outcomes are inside it. But then we said, what will teacher do for this to happen? And we made a measurable way of looking at it. And what will CRC do and BRC do? Now, if you want children to improve 5%, teacher has to improve something like 20%. I mean, this is just a way of speaking. You will not get very precise. But CRC and BRC have to improve 40% and district has to improve 60%. So if I cannot deliver that 60% improvement at the district level, I cannot see that 5% down at the school level. So the way to handle it is firstly to define it as clearly as possible. This is what happens in education, that things are vague. Define it in a way in which you can set targets that by this time this will be happening in these many places for this amount of time. It will be observable or verifiable or measurable. And then the second part, this is the cunning part, right? You have to roll it out. It's called the theory of small wins. You have to roll it out in such a way that every 15, 20 days, everybody involved feels that they're successful in something they were not successful before. That gives them the motivation, the commitment to go to the next one and the next. And it goes on increasing in difficulty every time. As we say, get a tiger to taste blood. And once they are hooked to that, then they don't want to stop. So that's the process that I would like to see. We have done this. We have multiple examples. There are tools that exist. And the last thing that I want to mention is, I often use a thing which I call homegrown definition of empowerment of teachers. So there are 3 qualities I want to see in any teacher or any person for that matter. One, I want them to be proud of what they're doing. And I want them to take their own decisions. And I want them to be their own greatest critic. Now, how can we do this systematically and systemically in a program like, say, Samagra Shiksha? So this is the part that I was saying is so simple that it's very difficult. So if we already have performance indicators. If we have definition of what it is to be a good teacher. So accept and recognize only people who meet a certain bar. Make this public, make them available, make teachers a party to assessing themselves. So then they can talk with each other. We don't have professional language right now. Nobody can say I'm level 2, you are which, level, we can't discuss that. So that's one. Second, there are many decisions which have to be taken and you can clearly bifurcate this decision only you will take. There are state governments which give lesson plans to all the teachers and everybody is to do the same thing. How is that possible? It's not going to happen. You cannot expect a remote tribal village and a city school to be doing the same thing on the same day. So get out of that, demarcate clearly. And lastly, how do you become your own greatest critic? So if I were a district education officer, I would have a meeting with teachers, head teachers, and say something like this. In the last 3 years, I have tried to do these things. Where could I improve more? Tell me. And then the moment you've done this, it gives you the moral authority to say, in the next 6 months, what are you going to improve? And what do you need me to do for it? The moment you take this approach, you will find everybody is willing. And again, we have examples from Maharashtra, from Karnataka, where something like this has happened, even in Tamil Nadu, where senior officials have actually done this kind of thing and sat with the people and discussed. And it has transformed teachers. And so a leader making himself or herself vulnerable costs nothing but achieves a lot.
One important thing which I feel is the continuity in learning also. Many a times we see training as you rightly said, a one-time activity that happens top down. And whereas there are different ways of actually continuing the learning throughout the year. Like in states where we are working, we have seen how blended online courses have supported teachers in improving their understanding on the pedagogy of language and numeracy. We have also seen simple things like WhatsApp nudges sent across to teachers once in a month, twice in a month, can actually help them understand these are certain things that I can do in the classroom. The resources that are available on the Diksha platform again help a teacher whenever they are stuck to go to refer to something and take account of it. Beside this, again, the one important thing that you mentioned is the kind of mentoring and academic support they should be getting on a daily basis. I would just quote an example. When I was listening to you, this example just came to my mind. Like we say that training of the teachers, but it is very true that even NEP, Nipun, everyone, everywhere you find out that it's not just the teacher who's responsible for the changing the classroom. It's the entire ecosystem around the teacher. That's the academic resource people, the mentors who go for regular classroom visits, the BO and the district education officers who are there to actually help the teachers, support the teachers. They all are responsible, and their learning equally is important. One example I want to quote here is like one of the teacher who was just doing some of the professional development course that we had organized, and she came to know about this group work, and she was doing this group work activity in her classroom. And naturally, the children were all sitting in groups. They were making noise, again constructive noise. But an administrator who just came for an inspection, I would say, when passed by the classroom, said, "Why is so much of noise in your classroom? Are you not able to handle your classroom so well?" And this teacher who knew that group work is so important will not be able to do it again, because the supervisor or the someone administrator coming into the classroom does not know the importance of it, and she might get a scolding again. So that's why I think the teacher might not do it again. So I think it's equally important that we work on the professional development of teachers along with the other people who are there to support them.
I want to also briefly mention this on continuity. You use the word continuity, and surely it's needed for teachers. But currently, we are at a point where continuity of learning is becoming a very big issue for children. It's because of climate change. So, a study that was done last year, it brought out that in 4 major states, we were losing 15 days for school closure and about 30 to 40 days for near extreme climate. It was too hot, too wet, too cold. You couldn't teach. School was not closed. So teaching learning time is coming down, and you have to deliver more than before, right? So that's a very big challenge. And in all of this, how much time can teachers stay away from class is another very big issue. And why would they want to learn is something we need to look at as well. Has LLF done any work on, say, teacher motivation or creating situations where they feel like teaching?
So I'll just give an example here, because we had been working with the teachers now for almost 10 years through different ways. We use professional development courses. There's one interesting thing that happened last year. Like we experimented with a group of teachers, around 26 teachers, who had been part of our professional development courses. Now we use them for many of our short duration courses as mentors. What we ask them is like, would you like to take this professional development course forward and get like 10 to 5 to 10 teachers under you take up this course? And so there were 26 teachers, group of teachers, again, ARPs in UPA itself. They volunteered. It is like out of the school hours, their working hours, they took up this challenge that within their blocks, they identified teachers who were again willing to take up this 1-year course. A 1-year course which has multiple assessments and all, but they were able to take it up forward, and 350 teachers under this 226 alumni mentors, I would say, completed that 1-year course. And when you speak to them, I would say it was again the motivation, again, the self-driven initiative of these teachers without any government mandate, without any letters from the government. So I would see that is where the part of motivation works in, when you actually give space for the teachers' recognition as mentors. A simple certificate for them works so well.
What happens is that it is possible to define and experience improvement and aspire for it. In teaching, unfortunately, that is not so easy. One is, like you mentioned, another role or a better role, and that's a very important step. Yet another is a ladder of progression, which tells you, how you would go from very basic novice level teaching practices to slightly more experienced to expert, to really much higher level. If that ladder of progression is available to teachers, then like my fundamental belief is no one has come in to become a bad teacher deliberately, right? So if something like that is available and they're supported to go up, then the motivation to keep moving is much stronger.
So we have talked so much about the gaps, the redesign, the ecosystem, the teachers' role themselves in the TPD. But I want to ask you a question that to bring it all together. What is a professional development that can truly change what happens for children inside the classroom? And what should be the way by which we can measure if we are getting there or not?
Okay, so whenever we look at anything in the system, our tendency is to look at what I will call proximate causes, as in what appear. For example, we say TLM is not there, let's give more TLM. Teacher is missing, let's provide a teacher. They don't have module, they don't have instruction, let's give. So everybody typically thinks of what is not there and trying to, but many things have already existed. There are teachers who are doing things where nothing is available, and there are teachers who are not doing anything where a lot is available. So there is a problem with that model, of the way of looking. So we need to look at certain root causes. One, we already talked about why teachers are motivated or not motivated. And so what I personally feel it works best is, and I'll give some examples of this as well, is what is the connect we have with teachers. This came to me first when I began, when I had to evaluate a large-scale program in Tamil Nadu called the ABL, Tamil Nadu ABL program. Of all the projects and programs in India, this has had the largest penetration anywhere, because a study of 1,800 schools out of 34,000 schools showed that 66% teachers were doing it with fidelity, complete fidelity. So then naturally the idea was to find out why. And they were doing it even after saying they don't agree with the pedagogy. so teachers were asked, why are you doing this? So almost everywhere, and we interviewed maybe about 4,000 teachers, they said we have been treated like human beings because the minister and the secretary went to many places, sat on the floor with us and said that we are doing this not because you've not done your work, but because we have not supported you. And so therefore we won't. Then I formally tested this out in Bangladesh. I organized 10 workshops, which are called listening workshops, where officials call teachers and they only could ask 4 questions. What do you do? What do you like doing? What do you find difficult? And how should we support you? At first, teachers refused to believe them, that you have come only to ask this. And then they poured their heart out, and then they told the officials, sir, we thought you're an official, but you're a human being. And the officials also said, yes, we thought you're a teacher, but you're a human being. But in about 10 days, 70% of those teachers were found to be doing new things in their class, which they knew after attending training year after year, but were not doing. So something happened during this time, right? So I think we need to work at the emotional climate that happens. That is one. But then we also need to back it up by, I mentioned this progression ladder, but we need process indicators. If I look only at the learning level, I will get no understanding of what is happening. I have to have clarity on what process is expected. I need process indicators with clear descriptors which tell me not only if something is happening, but how well. I call it the drip irrigation approach versus flooding. You have to provide what is needed, when it is needed, where it is needed, rather than just flood the place. And then start doing something like this over a period of time. But these performance indicators should be for all, the CRC, BRC, and they should also be rated along with teachers should also get to rate them. And your rating should improve only if children's learning improves. So there's a triangulation that has to be built in. Then you create a self-functioning process wherein everybody can take responsibility. Teachers start saying, oh, actually, I'm not able to do this. Well, can you help me out in this? Because they set a goal. Teachers are not living to fulfill our dreams. They want to do their own thing, right? How can I help them have a better dream? The moment I do that, when they have a dream and my job is to support them, TPD changes completely. Instead of me trying to push them into it, they are drawing me into that whole process. So I look upon the kind of shift we want as a cultural shift. It is not just about what better material, what new snazzy technology that I have. And lastly, it is perfectly possible if you have an indicator based with descriptor kind of supported set of standards, then it is possible to create an AI based support for anybody. Like if a teacher herself marks that she's not able to use TLM very well, immediately the app will throw, here are 3 things you can do to go to the next level. Then teacher becomes the driver of that change.
Yeah.
So how do we create tools for ownership? How do we create the climate for that ownership? And how do we get insecurities out of the way, reduce the hierarchy? And I'll mention this again, it has to be said many times. Whatever I'm saying is way cheaper. It costs much less because people have to do more of the work themselves rather than you doing it yourself. And we have evidence that it works from many different places. We just now have to put it in place.
Again, the next point that you made was that we measuring the if it is happening, that what we measure is whether the teachers are trained to do something.
We measure the input.
Yes. Whereas we should be seeing, did the classroom change?
Yes.
Was the teacher motivated enough? Was the teacher actually being able to engage the children in the classroom? That is something that we need to see. Also, with everything, we talked about continuity in learning. We talked about how that learning needs to be grounded in the classroom reality. Also, developing the understanding on the content as well as on the pedagogy. The other important part of it is how we should also train the teachers in developing the skill set as well as their belief, shifting their beliefs also. Many a times you find that the teachers do not believe that the children can learn. All the children can learn. Whereas we all know in the education that it is every child can learn. It is the way you actually teach them in the classroom. And that's a very important thing when we talk about the equity in learning across different classrooms. I think the teachers should also be motivated, trained. I would not say use the word train, but they should be capacitated well enough to handle classroom with multiple diverse conditions. Language diversity, children coming from different backgrounds, how they can handle this. I think diversity in the classroom is something that we also should be focusing on, which is very less spoken about, equity in the learning space. So that is something that I just wanted to bring in. Any inputs from your side when we talk about the equity in learning, because you have worked so much around that? Any inputs from your side on that?
Yeah, first, just you talked about beliefs, and it's true, teachers must have beliefs about children, but I find also that those in the system don't have any belief that the teacher will change. So, that faith is something which goes all the way across. It applies to equity as well. And one way to overcome it, I began my career by, living in a remote tribal village for 7 years. And I went from Delhi University, I was teaching here, and I thought I really knew something. But when I spent time with children in the forest, I realized that there was so much I didn't know at all. And every day I asked myself, what did I know if I didn't know this? They knew enormous things about, leaves, plants, animals, insects, and so on. I realized it's a very complicated thing to be able to herd about 100 cattle into the forest. They knew each and every animal. They knew the habits of the animal. They knew what it liked or didn't like. They would shoo it away from certain plants. They knew in which season when to turn back so that you reach in time when the sun sets, and where the water holes are at different times. I mean, I can go on for a long time on this. But my point is that if we want to look at the issue of equity, whoever we are considering as a so-called disadvantaged learner, we have to understand they are disadvantaged because of the pattern that we are imposing. This person is extraordinarily rich in terms of the fund of knowledge that they bring. So the moment I start making use of that, things change dramatically. So, for instance, I worked with I went to a center where there were children who were child workers, child laborers, right? And the teachers kept saying they don't speak anything much. But I asked them, what are the tools you use? Show me, tell me. And slowly they start telling me more. I started writing it down. That became a terrific lesson, and they were very active about it. How can if the moment I realize that this child is an expert, let's say I have a child in my class who is a child with mental disability. This child is an expert in the moods of her caregiver. So if I can spot the capability of each child and build on it, I make every child an advantage child in my class. There's a deep, attitudinal change that is required, and this is the challenge of it. Mostly when you work on attitudinal change, you happen to have one belief and the people you're working with have another belief. How tolerant are you of them? That's one thing. Are you sympathetic? Are you able to... Our job is not to convince them we are right. Our job is to help teachers realize that they could be different, which is very different, right? And when you make change, this part is not often discussed in TPD. We often talk about how concepts or information are developed, or sometimes how skills, but how do attitudes change? So attitudes change very differently. To change something, you have to accept that something was wrong in me. So you lose face. So you can do it only if you are emotionally secure and safe. So how do you create that is one. So the trainer has to communicate that he or she values the teacher irrespective of what he or she is or brings. Simply how you stand and listen, how you repeat what the teacher says, how you ask a question in response to what a teacher says, how you are willing to drop your pre-prepared session and discuss what they consider important. All of this communicates a lot. And then you will find that there is a hierarchy or a sequence of attitudinal change on equity. This took me maybe 15 years to learn, and unfortunately it's not a research paper which can be shared, but believe me, there is data from lakhs of teachers. One, that teachers first change their attitudes about children in general. Most of them feel children are no good, nothing. Then they change their attitude about poor children. What happens is that when they change their attitude about children a little bit, and some of the things I shared with you about children in the tribal area, when they begin to realize those things, then it gives them the conceptual equipment, the emotional equipment to go to the next level of change. If they don't have it, that change is very difficult. So there has to be a ladder of change. Then they change their view that children from communities other than their own can change, religions other than their own. Then they change their view that children from the most marginalized social groups, social castes can change. And this is an unfortunate but real thing. Right in the end, they come to believe that girls too can change. We talk of intersectionality, it's here also. But on the other hand, if you follow this sequence and if you follow methods, the methods are that if it's a relatively straightforward thing, when I want teachers to acquire something new, I give an example from among themselves. Like this teacher was doing this so exciting work. But if I want them to shed something, like a prejudice or a bias, I don't talk about here. I talk about in an island far away, this is what teachers were doing. What do you think? So that's a different approach. Then it's easy for them to be distant and make a change. Then we say, okay, why are we discussing this? And then, yes, we can talk about ourselves, right? So you follow a sequence of attitudinal change. Equity has to be experienced. And the moment a teacher shows even a slightest glimpse of it, a sign that they are following it or practicing it, if they're appreciated, then they take it to the next level.
Thank you so much, Subir. I think it was really, really interesting to have a conversation around the continuous professional development with you. And I'm sure our viewers must have got so many ideas on how we can improve the foundational literacy and numeracy if we strengthen the teacher professional development in a better way. What teacher require is just some kind of confidence in them that they can bring about a change, as we want them to believe that all children can learn. Teachers can also learn. What they need is clarity, continuous support, and also a confidence that they can bring about a change. So thank you so much. We will be back with you with another episode. Stay tuned for LLF Speak. Thank you.
Thank you
Subir.
so much. We enjoyed this.